I mean, they keep trying to explain that this was a joke, and how can we go after people who are just telling jokes? I've yet to hear anybody explain to me.
I guess the
what's
question
the joke? What's the joke?
Does it matter whether it was a joke or not?
Well, they're saying
because I don't know that speech has a joke clause.
Over the past few years, if you even so much as hint that Donald Trump is a fascist, Republicans lose their temper, as they so often do.
Or you put it into a manifesto after you try to assassinate him because you believe that he's a fascist and you think that justifies his assassination.
No, you guys have said that we shouldn't even call
terrorism.
Donald
That's
Trump
the
a
phrase
fascist.
that you say.
Then Donald Trump gets into office, he tries to remove comedians from the airwaves, and you guys run defense for it. Donald Trump tries to make a list of his political opponents that he wants to lock up.
On Newsnight with Abby Phillip and Adam Mockler go head-to-head with Scott Jennings and strongly challenge his stance as the conversation moves toward the Federal Communications Commission and raises a bigger issue about whether the government should have any say in what gets said on television. And Abby, along with Adam, make it clear that it does not require arrests or legal action for this to become a real problem, because even the possibility of regulatory pressure can influence behavior and quietly push networks to change what they say. So now let's get into it and watch how Abby Phillip and Adam Mockler firmly shut down Scott Jennings during this heated moment on Newsnight with Abby Phillip.
If you just divorce this moment from all the other moments in the last 8 months, maybe you might believe him, but there's a lot of history here that points to targeting of ABC over viewpoints that they disagree with on their broadcast.
Yeah, and there's real issues about, the equal time rule, other elements like that. I don't like the president jawboning. I especially don't like the president jawboning when it is keeping Jimmy Kimmel. It's the same dynamic that we see with interest rates. The more he says we should lower interest rates, the independence of the Fed keeps them the same, even when they probably would have lowered them absent that. Jimmy Kimmel would probably be fired if Donald Trump, stopped talking about him. Because I swear to God, this is the only time I ever hear about Jimmy Kimmel. I've never heard somebody say, hey, you know what? Jimmy Kimmel had a funny joke the other day. I've never, ever, ever heard anyone say that. I'm tired. I'm tired of Jimmy Kimmel. Let him fade off into obscurity. Let his memory be the Man Show, which somehow has not resulted in his cancellation 20 years later.
So I mean, do you think that this is the FCC trying to execute on Trump's desire to have Jimmy Kimmel punished?
I honestly don't know. I mean, there are normal things that occur in the course of reviewing the license. Obviously, the rhetoric around this goes above and beyond that. If there's any actual action taken, it goes above and beyond that. As somebody who actually appreciates the First Amendment, I think the idea of allowing Jimmy Kimmel to be a martyr for the First Amendment is something that sickens me.
Scott?
Yeah, I did speak to Brendan Carr, too, the other day about this issue. And, he had explained that they were already in this early review process, that there is some sort of DEI review going on with the licenses. It's been going on over time. They do have the ability to call them in for an early review. I'm not totally steeped in all the bureaucratic processes there, but there's a legitimate thing that the FCC does. On the Kimmel piece, I got to say, I still don't know what the joke is.
He's not
expectant widow. I mean, they keep trying to explain that this was a joke, and how can we go after people who are just telling jokes? I've yet to hear anybody explain to me.
I guess the
what's
question
the joke? What's the joke?
Does it matter whether it was a joke or not?
Well, they're saying
because I don't know that speech has a joke clause.
Maybe it doesn't. But for them to then, and he's been pretty defensive about it the last couple of nights, but for them to say, oh, we're just out here telling jokes. I wish somebody could explain to me what is the joke about wish casting the death of the President of the United States or anybody else?
Well, I have two questions for you. I mean, one would be, again, does it really matter whether it was a joke or not? But secondly, I'm just going to play this because this is Trump talking at the White House on Tuesday about his marriage to Melania. Listen.
When you look at the bigger picture, a clear pattern shows up where media companies have faced political pressure over time, not only in this case, but in many others, as watchdog groups have pointed out concerns about politicians from both sides trying to sway coverage by using regulatory bodies like the Federal Communications Commission. And the reason those agencies were created to stay independent was so they would not react to political noise. Yet something people often forget is how uncommon it is for the FCC to get involved in content, since their main role deals with technical matters like licensing, broadcast standards, and spectrum allocation, rather than judging jokes or commentary. So when content suddenly becomes part of the issue, it raises concerns because that is not their normal role. And the debate about whether something is a joke or not actually misses the larger point, because the First Amendment does not protect speech only when it is funny, polite, or comfortable, as some of the most protected speech in U.S. history has been offensive or difficult to hear, and courts have consistently ruled that the government cannot step in just because speech is seen as inappropriate. And there is also some clear irony, because political figures, including Donald Trump, have a long record of using strong and controversial language in public. So trying to suddenly define what is too far becomes complicated, since that line has not been applied in a consistent way. Which is why Abby's argument connects, because it is not about defending one comedian or one network, but about understanding when criticism turns into pressure, and when that pressure begins to look like influence. Because once regulators start reacting to speech instead of staying neutral, then the conversation is no longer just about jokes, but about who has the power to shape what gets said.
And they were married for 63 years. And excuse me if you don't mind. That's a record we won't be able to match, darling. I'm sorry. Just not going to work out that way. We'll do well, but we're not going to do that well. 63 years.
That was a joke.
Well,
I don't think he's living to 120.
That was a joke.
He is 80. She's much younger. He's not going
Right.
to be around for. Kimmel's problem is he's not very funny.
Kimmel says that that's the point that he was trying to make.
The morning of the morning of Charlie Kirk's death, or the night after, he revealed his true, I think, gutter instinct where it comes to Trump. He hates Trump so much, Kimmel, that he could, use that platform, and he hates, with Charlie Kirk's death, his murder on live television. That body was still unburied when Kimmel was making jokes. And it was so insensitive.
It doesn't matter if it's sensitive. It's the First Amendment. It doesn't matter if it's insensitive. It doesn't matter if it's funny. It's the First Amendment.
But
and
Trump has said so many
Yes, but you also can't say profanity on FCC regulated channels. No, I'm saying there are limitations that are imposed because they're using public spectrum.
With fines, you get fines for those things, but you don't get attacked by the president. What this really just shows is
he can go on a podcast and say all these things. He can have a Substack.
He can also say it on
broadcasting.
Over the past few years, if you even so much as hint that Donald Trump is a fascist, Republicans lose their temper, as they so often do.
Or you put it into a manifesto after you try to assassinate him because you believe that he's a fascist and you think that justifies his assassination.
No, you guys have said that we shouldn't even
stochastic
call
terrorism.
Donald
That's
Trump
the
a
phrase
fascist.
that you.
The reality is simple. Being offensive, insensitive, or even completely unfunny has never been the legal test for speech in the United States, because the First Amendment protects a wide range of speech that many people may strongly dislike. And the Supreme Court has ruled more than once, including in Hustler magazine v. Falwell, that even highly offensive satire aimed at public figures is still protected. And that case went much further than anything being discussed here. And while there are limits on broadcast television, such as indecency rules enforced by the Federal Communications Commission, those rules are narrow and usually apply to things like explicit language during certain hours and do not cover political jokes or criticism of public figures. And when violations do happen, the outcome is typically fines rather than political pressure or public threats from those in power, which is why this situation starts to feel different. Because once a president or government officials begin publicly going after a comedian or a network, the focus shifts away from whether the joke was appropriate and moves toward a bigger question about whether the government should be involved at all. And historically, this is a boundary the United States has tried to keep very clear, especially after past moments where politicians were accused of trying to pressure or intimidate media outlets. And there is also a clear consistency issue, since political figures, including Donald Trump, have made remarks over the years that many people viewed as harsh, insensitive, or extreme. Yet the expectation has always been that speech is answered with more speech rather than government pressure, which is why Kat and Adam's point stands out, because you do not have to agree with what was said or believe it stayed within limits. But once you start allowing speech to be punished based on how offensive it feels or who it targets, you create a standard that can easily be used against anyone.
Then Donald Trump gets into office, he tries to remove comedians from the airwaves, and you guys run defense for it. Donald Trump tries to make a list of his political opponents that he wants to lock up, like, I don't know, Comey, Letitia James. He's talking about
I impeached
people.
the guy, and I'm sitting here talking about him, right? Like you see me in the concentration camps right now.
I'm referring
We're
to
not in
other.
a fascist
Wait, do you not
republic.
think he has fascistic tendencies? Do you not
I
think
don't
they're
think
trying
that
to
guy's
take people off the
Using
air?
the term fascist is so fraught.
No,
No,
Donald
I
Trump is
don't.
taking comedians
You're
off
talking
the air.
about,
I don't think it's
you're
that
talking about
fascist,
a
it's
political.
But hang on. Guys.
Somebody else.
Well, I'll only interject to say this because we've played it before on the show. But Trump has repeatedly called his political opponents fascists, communists, et cetera, et cetera. So if the word fascist in and of itself is so beyond the line, Trump has crossed that line.
Additionally,
He has crossed.
It's simplistic rather than beyond the line.
Listen,
It's
my point is that if you're going to use it as an argument to say that Democrats have gone too far, the president has gone just as far.
but hold on, this isn't just about
I don't
Kimmel. It's
disagree
not.
with
your rhetoric, it
Guys,
deserves
it's
some
not just
reflection
about
and concern.
Kimmel.
If that's
It's not just about Kimmel. Last night, we saw in Texas courts that the case for Alex Jones and the Sandy Hook families, which has been going on for more than 8 years, these families have been tortured by this man for over a decade. He somehow found a legal loophole made just for him. Even lawyers don't totally understand what's happening here. And if you're watching this and you're in Texas, you should call your representative and ask what the hell is happening with that deal. This goes to speech all across the spectrum, except for the people that align with the most extreme parts of the right.
Do you have a vested interest in that case?
Sorry?
Do you have a vested interest in the
Yeah, my
outcome of
partner owns The Onion, but also, do you not want the Sandy Hook families to get their fair share?
I do. I think
because
Alex
right now,
Jones
this
should
is
be off
the
air. I
only
just
deal.
was saying, like, there are other externalities there when it comes to that. So I like disclosure. I like honesty.
Yes,
That's
and I
fair.
think the Sandy Hook
Sure.
families deserve every ounce.
Absolutely.
Honestly, whether something gets labeled a certain way or not is not even the main issue here. The real focus should be on what is actually happening in practice. Because when politicians openly talk about going after critics, media figures, or even legal opponents, that stops being just talk and starts looking like a pattern that has historically raised concern in many democracies. And groups like Freedom House have pointed out that one of the early warning signs for democratic backsliding is pressure on media and political opponents, rather than just the use of strong language. And when you look at speech protections in the United States, the standard has stayed fairly consistent, since the government is not allowed to step in just because speech is offensive or politically charged, with real limits only showing up in narrow cases like direct incitement or defamation. Which is why cases such as New York Times v. Sullivan set such a high bar by making it clear that even harsh or incorrect criticism of public figures is part of democratic life. And the Alex Jones case is often brought up here as a comparison, but it is actually very different, because that situation involved knowingly spreading false claims that led to real harm, which is why courts treated it differently from ordinary jokes, commentary, or political criticism. And there is also a consistency problem that people often ignore, since political figures, including Donald Trump, have used very strong and extreme language about opponents for years. So treating certain kinds of speech as unacceptable only when they come from one side can feel selective, which is why Kat and Adam's point connects, because you do not have to agree with the tone or the jokes being made. But once speech starts being judged and policed based on how harsh it sounds or who it is directed at, the conversation shifts away from open debate and moves closer to control.